day at Westminster Abbey. I mean, talk about worshipping at the altar of the NHS. I mean, look at this, everybody. That is the order of service. I've got to say, I think this is one of the problems with the NHS in the country, is that if you dare to criticise it, it's almost like you have attacked the Lord Almighty or something. Odd, if you ask me, Martin.
Yeah, so I have a 5-point plan, and your viewers made some excellent points. They're a switched-on bunch. First of all, that proves it rightly. Stop treating the NHS like a church and remove the politics from it. Now, no political party should own the NHS, yet they constantly make out it's a thing of the left. It isn't. No, your politics shouldn't be a part of it. Secondly, it needs a full financial audit. Use people from Scandinavia, from America, from Germany, where health actually works. Why are we obsessed with pouring water into a leaking bucket? Third, encourage private use via tax breaks or opt-out two-tier health service. So what? If richer people are out of the way and allow poorer people to get a full benefit, where's the problem? Fourthly, axe all the non-jobs, the diversity jobs, the inclusivity jobs, the net zero jobs, the non-jobs. Get rid of the whole lot of them and get more nurses. And I agree with your viewer's point there. Let's end this obsession with degrees. Let's let experience count, matrons, and also British staff. Let's stop relying on immigrants to fill those posts. That's my 5-point plan.
That's his 5-point plan. We'll come back to that in a sec. Aaron, have you got a plan?
I do have a plan. I thought, by the way, Annie sounds like a very sharp lady.
Well done, Annie.
Yeah, from Norwich. Restore nurse and junior doctor pay to 2010 levels. 2, repeal the Health and Social Care Act so that the Secretary of State is responsible for performance, not some CEO or bureaucrat nobody's ever heard of, because you can get rid of the politicians if they don't do what they claim. Number 3, end the requirement on health authorities to put services out to competitive tender. Number 4, a tax on social media companies to pay for expanded mental health services. Their products, which have earned them a mint, have led to a pandemic of mental ill health amongst young people. They should be responsible in helping to deal with that. And then 5, and maybe Martin might even agree on this one, a legal ban on management consultants working for and on behalf of the NHS. Management decisions and strategic thinking should be done by people working in the NHS who have a vested interest in its long-term success.
Well, there you go, everybody. What do you think to the panel's 5-point plan? I found the response today quite interesting. For example, I think your last point there, you were saying about use British workers to staff the NHS. The flaw in the plan, though, the reason that you need overseas workers is because a lot of people don't want to enter the NHS, or they do, staff members I'm on about, or then they leave.
Yeah, and the old-fashioned political left, people from Aaron's persuasion, used to back the idea of better wages for working-class people. And that's gone out the window now because we're so used to cheap labour from around the world because of globalisation. We're effectively outsourcing the NHS to the cheapest competitor, which happens to be people coming from overseas. And I think we need to have a real look at that. I'd like to see working-class bursaries, so people are encouraged into the profession from working-class backgrounds, because the cost of a degree puts off working-class people getting into all sorts of professions, particularly nursing. So I think we've become too reliant on cheap labour. It's the same in Starbucks, it's the same in pubs, it's the same in the service sector, full stop. And it's certainly the case in the NHS. We should be putting British jobs first and putting money into that if necessary.
And you said you want to restore the pay of junior doctors, what was it, to 2010, did you say?
Yeah, over the long term.
Yeah.
In 1 or 2 years, but over the long term, I think.
Why 2010?
Because they have seen their real pay fall by between 20 and 35%, depends what your job is, over that time period. And we know that in 2010 there was a bunch of metrics where staff satisfaction was quite high, recruitment was pretty good, patient satisfaction was quite high. So I think it's a reasonable benchmark to work towards. And it's important to say, I mean, that's a demand right now of striking junior doctors and nurses. I think it has to be a gradual one. I think to say that we're going to increase your pay by 20% in 1 year, I don't think anybody...
Well, they're asking 35, aren't they, the BME?
That's a bargaining tool. I think they'd be very happy with 15 or 10%, frankly. But a long-term commitment to returning to broadly what we saw in 2010. And I'd add this, just sort of building on what Martin said. We have a shortfall of 100,000 healthcare staff in this country, about 50,000 nurses. Doesn't matter if you want a private system, somebody said privatise, or a public system, it doesn't matter. If we're not training enough healthcare workers, it's all academic, because you need the nurses and the doctors. And so I think that's the first thing we need to really go on, and it's actually a source of sort of political agreement. Rishi Sunak outlined this plan to train more healthcare workers domestically. The problem is I don't think he's going to put his money where his mouth is.
See, I wonder at home as well whether or not you're satisfied with the service that you get from the NHS, because you see all these opinion polls, don't you? And I'm always a bit dubious when it comes to opinion polls anyway, because I've never been polled for anything in my entire life, so I always do, and I use that as my anecdote because I don't know who you're asking. But I think that actually the NHS is used as a political football in this country. I think too few politicians have got the chops to actually pick it up and seriously put a microscope on it and go, right, we're going to truly radically reform this thing, root and branch. I don't think anyone's got the chops for it. I don't.
No, we have a uni party on the NHS. We had a uni party on lockdowns and COVID, which is part of the problem. We became a COVID health service, and all the sort of knock-on effects we're seeing now in terms of cancer appointments are a direct consequence of the fact we had political uniformity on going down the same route. And you're right, no one's got the guts to tackle what is effectively... It's 75 years old. Michelle, I don't think the NHS is going to make it to 100 if it carries on the way it is. It's on life support. It needs a radical overhaul. And I'm afraid all we're hearing out of Steve Barclay, well, he'll be gone soon anyway, no doubt, all we're hearing from politicians is more of the same, more money, pour it into a leaking bucket. I think it takes bigger cojones than that to sort this problem out.
See, Tony Blair's popped up today, hasn't he? And he's been saying quite a few different things, actually. He's saying that it needs radical reform, it's got to embrace technology, people should be able to kind of, the way that I'm going to say it is kind of go private if that's what they're so inclined to do. What do you think to his intervention?
But they can do that already. I found that particularly strange because one of the shortcuts in the NHS is you can see a consultant privately. Might cost you a couple of £100. You might have to get an MRI or an X-ray or whatever. You get your diagnosis and you can take 6 months out of that sort of user journey in the NHS and you go straight to treatment. So you can do that already. I'm not going to make a judgment about people who do that or don't do it. So I don't quite understand his point there effectively, because as Wes Streeting said a moment ago, there is a two-tier service where those who can afford to do that. So Wes Streeting's saying we shouldn't have that. Tony Blair's saying we should have that. It's a bit of a strange one. But fundamentally, with Tony Blair's rare interventions, which seem to be almost weekly, the Blair Institute has 850 members of staff. This is a party within a party. This is an organisation which is seeking to influence policy and at the same time send people into the Labour Party as MPs. Many people now contesting Labour seats in the next election were working for the Tony Blair Institute at one time or another. And my worry is, given who funds the Blair Institute, including the US State Department, why does he say the things he does? Is it because he thinks it's in the national interest, or because it curries favours with the people that donate large sums of money to his organisation?
Well, I think it's more than that.
You cynic, you, Aaron.
I think it's more than that. So we saw during COVID that Blair was the driving force behind COVID passports. And he talks today about the NHS app, about the digital ID, embracing tech. What Blair wants is for everyone to be a walking barcode and all your medical history to be on that, including your vaccination status, a form of Chinese social credit. And he wants the Blair Institute to be able to be in charge, to be doing it, to roll it out, to get the massive contracts. Blair is an opportunist. He's a capitalist at heart. We're seeing that in its full, naked glory now.
What makes me smile, I have a wry smile, because my business background is IT transformation. So I would work with organisations and look at how they can leverage digital technology to be more effective and efficient. And when you do this kind of trade, you almost learn. It's like a textbook example of how not to do things. And it's the National Programme for IT. It's one of the biggest public sector IT technology failures of all time in this country, by the way. And it's cost you, me, us, the taxpayers, depending on which kind of calculations you use and all the rest of it, what you put in dirt, tens of billions of pounds, some people would say, that cost this country to achieve the square root of absolutely nothing. And that was Tony Blair's brainchild. Now, if I'd have sat and created and kind of took the country down this path of wasted billions on a failed IT project, I probably would not see myself as the face of the next digital transformation of the NHS. I'd probably stay a bit stum about that bit, if I can get away with it. So I find this quite an intriguing route for him to take.
Yeah, but not surprising, because that's where the money is. Follow the money. Blair is a true globalist He is. He's out there. He wants everybody in the Western world to be a barcode on your phone, and that is the way he wants to go. And he wants to run that technology. He was pushing the Green Pass in Israel. He had his clause into Michael Gove, even on the advisory board of what Britain should be doing with COVID passports. Tony Blair sees this as a massive financial opportunity, not for the good of humanity, but for the good of his bank account.
When it comes to spending, a lot of you will get in touch and you'll say the Tories have not spent enough money on the NHS. I'll just bring a quick graph up to show you the spending. So just to give you some perspective here, you can see these are the years at the bottom and the billions on the left. If you take out the 2021 spend, which was 201 billion, of course, enhanced for COVID, you'll see 23-24 spend is 182 billion. 180 was 22-23. So in essence, when people say that the spending and all the rest of it has been reduced on the NHS, that's simply not true. Yep. Get your 5-point plans into me there. I will be reading some more of them out, see whether or not we can get one of you guys promoted